Good afternoon. It's August 25th, the year 2000. I'm Mayor Livingston, and this afternoon Tom Bush and I, on behalf of the Southwest Georgia Regional Library, are interviewing Buck Dixon on his experiences in World War II in the Central Pacific. Well, Buck, let's turn the pages back to 1942. The war has just begun, and I believe you are 17 years old.
Right.
And a lot of your friends, well, you're going to be drafted, and two of your friends, and three of you decided to join the Marines.
That's right.
And tell us, back in those days, you had to get a release from the draft. Is that right?
Right. And we Norman Murkison and Julian Smith were the two. And I decided we'd join the Marine Corps. So we went over. They had registered for the draft. I had not quite got 18 and had not registered. So we went over to the draft board for them to get their release. And there was a lady in there named Florine Corn. And John Algonis, you remember him, he was head of the draft board. Well, the boys told Ms. Cohen what they wanted. She started getting it up. She looked at me and she said, "You want your release?" They had told her that we were going to join the Marine Corps. And I said, "No, I don't want a release." And she says, "If you join the Marine Corps and your name comes up, we'll draft you, take you out of the Marine Corps and put you where we want you." I said, "No, you won't." So she got mad and she got upset, and so Mr. Algonis was in the wheelchair. So he come rolling in. He wanted to know what the trouble was. Well, I'd been knowing him all my life and he knew me. He said, "But what in the world's going on?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you." I said, "Mr. Algonis, she's wanting me to get a release from the draft board to join the Marine Corps, and I've never registered for the draft. I'm not old enough." Well, that made her mad because she said I was a smarthead because I didn't tell her I wasn't registered. And I said, "You didn't ask me if I was registered."
Well, back then, though, to join the Marines, it was a little bit different. You had to get a letter from the chief of police, I believe.
That's right. You had to have a character reference.
And one from the
one
school.
From the school principal, and one from somebody you worked, that you had worked for.
And I believe that was Clayton Walker.
Clayton Walker.
We all remember Clayton Walker.
Clayton owned a Marvel Cleaning Company and steam laundry, and I worked for him the first of every month collecting bills. And we went all over. I'd go all over town on a bicycle and collect bills for him. Had a lot of good experience in that. Things that happened.
Well, at 17, though, yeah, and that's how, were you and Julian and Norman all about the same, they were a little bit older?
They were about a year older than me.
Now, you hadn't graduated from high school?
No, I was in my last year in high school.
You were a senior at Bainbridge High School.
Right.
And the three of you, I believe, went to Thomasville and Thomasville to
The main thing I had to do is go home and talk my mama into signing the papers. And that was a job. But I got talked her into it. And that night, the three of us caught a train, went over to Thomasville, changed trains, and went to Atlanta. The next morning, we went into the Marine Recruit Depot, office, which was in the post office in Atlanta at that time. And there was other fellows in there from all over the place just about it, joining. And it was odd. They turned Julian down because he had flat feet. He told his major, he said, "I'm not, no, you got to take me." He said, "I am not going to go back home." He said, "I've done told everybody goodbye. I was joining the Marine Corps, and I'm not going home now." And so he said, "Anybody wants to go that bad," he says, "we'll take you."
Well, Buck, tell me this now. This was in the spring of '42?
No, it was in the fall.
Okay,
right
the
after
war.
football season.
Okay, the war had been going on since
41,
since
December of 41.
December
Yeah.
41, and there was a lot of people joining the
Oh
Marine.
yeah. But you know, it was odd. It was fair.
Well, why did you decide to bring the three
Well,
of
I
you?
tell you, I had two brothers.
They were older then.
Both they were older. My oldest brother, James, he was in the army. He had joined the army. My other brother, Carl, he was just joined. I left Bainbridge with the National Guard, with Emmett Cole's group,
Oh, okay.
with the National Guard. And I said, two and one family in the army is enough. And at the time, the day we joined, there was a naval recruit station set up, a little wagon set up across by the park, across the street from old Parker's old clothing company.
That was in Bainbridge.
Bainbridge signed up recruits for the Navy. Well, I sat there and I looked at those fellas with those little, I don't mean no disrespect for the Navy, but I wouldn't have wore one of them monkey suits for nothing in the world.
And you,
No way I'd have put something on that had 13 buttons I had to go around and with a little monkey cap on my head.
and you and Julian and Norman felt the same way. about
Same
the
way.
Navy.
So we decided to go to Atlanta. Now the nearest recruit station was Atlanta. So for the Marines. And so we decided we'd go join the Marine Corps.
And you went from Atlanta to Paris.
Paris Island. That night, we joined that day. And believe it or not, it took all day when they got through examining us and all kind of stuff and checking everything. And it was late that afternoon. We got in there early in the morning because we rode on the train all night. And we got there and they put us on a bus late that afternoon and carried us up to Yamasee,
South Carolina.
South Carolina. You know where Yamasee is at? Well, they had some old buses looked like they'd go fall apart any minute from the Paris Island to meet us at the bus station in Yamasee. So they transferred us off of that, put us on those buses and carried us out to Paris Island.
But wasn't it a DI, a drill instructor met you at Yamasee? I mean, that's where
yeah.
you got the first shock of the Marine.
Well, the first shock that I had, and I started thinking I had made a drastic mistake. They put us on the island at that time. There was only one brick building, the administration building. All the rest was wood huts, little wood shacks and tents. They run us down in this brick building and had a long haul. But like I say, we'd been riding all day, been examined and all that and everything. The night before, we had rode all night on the train. So I was standing there and I was leaning against what I call a wall. A little corporal come along and he says, don't lean on the bulkhead. I said, the who? He said, the bulkhead. I said, what the hell is a bulkhead? He said, that. That's when I found out that you don't have walls in the Marine Corps, you have a bulkhead.
And you don't have bathrooms.
He chewed me out. You have a head.
Yeah.
He chewed me up one side and down the other. Told me just how dumb and stupid I was. And I'm beginning to agree with him. Well, I wouldn't have been there. I'd have stayed at home.
Yeah, you and Julian and Norman all went through
All went
Paris
through
Island.
Paris Island.
And back, you told me then it was what, 3 months?
It was 16 weeks altogether.
4 months. 4 months.
Altogether, rifle range, everything, 16 weeks.
And okay, from there you went to what you
I
call New River.
want to tell you one thing while I was there. You know this fellow here in Bainbridge, Avery Yancey, who manager the Harvey's out here at one time.
Oh yeah, yes.
Well, one morning, the first morning on Paris Island, they carried us to the barber shop. Well, they took you in, and we had quite a few fellows from the north, and a lot of them were Italian descent. I don't know why, but it seemed we had a lot of them. And they had nice wavy black curly hair and everything. And they'd take you in the barber shop, and you had some real smart barbers. and they'd ask you, how would you like it cut? Well, they'd say, well, just take a little off the side. Don't take none off the top and all that kind of crap. Then they take those shears and they start back here and they let it fall down on front where you could see it. Now, I'm going to tell you, they shaved, when they got through with you, your head was like the palm of your hand. It was bare. Well, I was one of the first ones to go in and get a haircut. I come out and we was waiting for the rest to go in. And this fella come out, and there was I thought, God, that bit. And I had to tell him, I told him, I said, fella, I don't know you, you don't know me, but I just want to tell you, you got the ugliest head I ever seen in my life. It looked like you had valleys and hills and everything on it. It was Eddie Yancey.
But you didn't know him at that time.
I did not know him. He was from Old Sulla, Georgia.
Yeah.
And he had joined the Marine Corps at the same time. And I didn't know him until then. And we met. And we've been good friends ever since. And when he came here as manager of a store, grocery store.
Yeah, I remember.
And Mayor and I were in there, and she was shopping one day, and I went with her. And I noticed this fella kept looking at me, and I kept looking at him. And the man said, what are y'all trying to do, stare each other down? I said, I know that man from somewhere. Well, this was 10 or 12, 15 years after the war. Finally, he walked over and he said, you Buck Dixon? I said, yeah, and you Edgar Yancey. It hit me like that.
But you went from, y'all went from, you and Julian and Norman went from Quantico to New River.
Right.
You call New River and I call Camp Lejeune.
Yeah, well, Camp Lejeune, New River is part of Camp Lejeune. We left Paris Island and went up to Camp Lejeune. And we got there and it was so cold the ground was frozen. I'm not kidding. Well, it was cold and all we had to sleep in was tents. There was no heat. No heat at all in those tents. And of course you had your blanket, 2 blankets. But believe me, that wasn't quite enough. So what we would do at night, they had a building built, a block building with a head. And it was steam heated. So a bunch of us would get at night, we would go and get our blankets in the afternoon and we'd go find us a place in the head and lay our blankets out, and that's where we slept. We'd sleep in the head because it was too cold to stay in them tents.
Well, did the 3 of you guys stay together through Camp Lejeune?
All the way through Camp Lejeune.
And this is, but you all, before we leave them, all 3 of you all survived the war. And Norman was killed as a policeman.
All 3 made it back home.
Yeah.
Now.
And I believe you were in the 4th Division.
Right.
And Julian was in the 3rd.
And Norman was in the 2nd.
Division.
They couldn't have, and we were hoping that we'd stay together. But they couldn't have put us any further apart, I don't believe, than separated.
And you went from there to Quantico?
Well, when the 16 weeks was up, we were through. They reassigned us, and where we were where we were going. And they sent Julian and Norman out to the West Coast. I was sent up to Quantico, and I went to a school in Quantico for I forget how many weeks it was. But I think it was about 8 weeks or more. But it was a weapons school.
And that's when you learned more.
We learned every weapon the Marines had.
That's when you learned about the bazooka.
We learned the bazooka. They kept telling us we got a secret weapon. We're going to show you. And you do not even talk about it to each other. It's such a secret. And it was a stinking little old piece of pipe with a wire on it. And it was the bazooka. And they said it's a secret weapon.
But you were really trained, because we'll get into this later, as a mortarman. Now you were in a mortar squad.
Well, I learned mortars while I was at Quantico.
Oh, you went from Quantico, from Quantico, that's when you...
Right.
And,
when I finished Quantico, they loaded us on a train. And I asked the colonel, Lieutenant Colonel, I says, went in and said, sir, I have not been home since I joined the Marine Corps. And I would like a leave, or delay in transfer or something. Go home. He said, when you get out to California, talk to him about it.
Oh, shoot.
That's right. So that was the end of that conversation. You know how that went. So I went back. The next day we boarded the train, and we came all the way down to Atlanta. Well, I started to get off that train in Atlanta.
Oh, but you don't want to do that.
I said, "What?" Then I got to thinking, I had seen some of those boys at Camp Lejeune that was in prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And believe me, now back then, they wore a ball and chain. You ever see one with a ball and
yeah.
chain? They had their leg, those ankle things on, and a ball about this big around steel ball they carried in their hand that was chained to their leg.
That wasn't worth deserting the
Oh,
AWA war.
no, I said, I'd
But you went on from the train. You had to go through Atlanta. You went on to Camp Pendleton.
Went Camp Pendleton.
Now, is that when they put together the 4th Division?
Right, they were forming the 4th Division then.
At Camp Pendleton.
Camp Pendleton.
And that's when you were sitting by a creek one time and
That,
a man walked
right,
up to you.
After we got, I was assigned to I Company, 3rd Battalion, 24th Marine.
Now, you stayed with our company.
Right.
The whole time.
The whole time. We went on maneuvers. Camp Pendleton, you've been there.
No, I never did get
You
there.
never get, it is a tremendous, it was a land grant originally from the King of Spain to the Spaniards. It was San Margarita, Rancho San Margarita. And in 1940, the government bought it, the whole thing. And the old ranch house was still there. And they made a Marine base out of it. Well, this covers thousands and thousands of acres of land. It runs almost back to the Arizona border, across California. It doesn't go quite to the ocean, but it goes near about back to Arizona. Well, we maneuvered all out in those hills and everything, way back up in there. And there was a little creek. We were back in there on a maneuver one time, and there was a little creek running. Well, we had walked all day, and my feet was hurt. And I went, after we got settled in for the evening, I walked down this little creek and pulled my shoes off and put my feet, sit on the bank and put my feet out in that little creek. Well, as a guy come up, wasn't too long like that, and sit down beside him and pull his shoes off, put his feet in there. Well, we got to talking. Eventually, I looked around and looked. Bless God, he had 2 stars on his collar. I said, oh my God, here I am. I wasn't on the corporal. I'm sitting here with a 2-star general. I knew who it was. I knew when I looked at him good, I knew it was General Clifton Gates.
Gates. Yeah. Well, he was a hero in the First World War.
In World War I, he was at Battle Woods.
And you came to be in the Marines. You know who Clifton Gates.
That's
Gates.
right.
Later became commandant.
He later became commandant of the Marine Corps. And he and I sat there, I guess, for over an hour and just talked, just like 2 people. And I asked him how long he'd been in the Marine Corps. And he told me that when he joined it was back in 15 or 16. And I asked if he was in World War I. He said, yeah. And he told me about Belleau Woods and Chateau there, all them places and all. And he just said, we just sat there and talked. Just like to anybody. And I thought, God Almighty, that's unusual for a little corporal to sit in and talk to a 2-star general that way. But we got to be real, friends.
Now, you were with the 24th Regiment.
Right.
And you shipped out, the division was formed, and you shipped out in 1943.
Right.
And this was one of the few times you were shipped directly that ever happened.
It's the
Y'all
only,
loaded up and then went straight to Quadulum.
right.
Did you know where you were going?
No, we had no idea. We, word come in that we were, well, let me tell you, before that, about 3 weeks before, word got to leaking out that we were going overseas. But nobody knew when or exactly. So I went down, and I went in and talked to Captain Arsenal, my company commander. And I told him, I said, Sir, I've been in the Marine Corps a long time. I have not had a furlough. I have not been home since the day I left to go to boot camp. And I would like to go home because word's out that we're fixing to go overseas. He said, okay. He said, we'll see what we do. He said, I'll talk to Colonel Litzenberg. That was our battalion commander. So he called me in the next day and he said, I got you 14 days. I can't tell you why 14. I don't know how they come up with that figure, but I was tickled to death to get it. So I come home. Now back then,
You had to ride the train.
you had to ride the train. There was no such thing as going down to the airport and catching a plane like it is now. And I went up to Los Angeles. I bought a ticket. And to get a ticket to Bainbridge, Georgia, to get off in Bainbridge, I had to buy a ticket to buy a round trip to Valdosta. Because that's the only thing that guy had on his paper that I knew the train would go and come through here and went to. He didn't even have Dothan. When I left Montgomery, I caught the train that came through here and went to Savannah. So I bought a round trip ticket to Valdosta. And when it got to Bainbridge, that's when I got home. Well, it took me 4 days and 5 nights to get here.
In 4 days and 5 nights.
4 days
to
and
get home.
5 nights to go back. So I had 4 days at home. And that was all I had. But anyway, then when I got back, a week after I got back, we boarded trucks and went down to San Diego to board ship.
Now you had been assigned then to the mortar squad.
Oh yeah, I had helped form in the Marine company. You had 3
Well,
regiments of infantry. Then, 3 platoons of infantry and 1 platoon of weapons. Well, half that platoon was machine guns. The other half was mortars. Well, we had Lieutenant Anthony Moore was in charge of the mortars. And out of the platoon, I had the first squad in the platoon, the squad leader. We had a Sergeant Jones that was supposed to be our platoon sergeant. Now, he was known as Hideaway Jones. Now, you won't believe this, but I don't know where he's at today, and if he's still living. But that was about the worst man I ever seen in my life to find or anything. Just as sure as you landed on an island, he disappeared. Nobody could find him, and nobody could see him or anything until the fighting was over and you just go and get boarding ship to leave. But
now he was your
platoon sergeant.
Platoon sergeant. All right.
So nobody never, during combat, you was not worried with Sergeant Jones because he was not there. Where he was at, I don't know.
But he stayed with you the whole time, or
And-
Saipan, the whole
Right.
bit.
Yeah.
Now tell us just briefly about Lieutenant Moore.
Well-
We're jumping ahead of ourselves.
Well-
We brought it up,
Yeah.
and he was your lieutenant.
Lieutenant
And incidentally, this captain you mentioned, I believe,
Captain.
stayed with you the whole
Oh
time.
yeah, Captain
Still living.
Arsenault. Captain Albert Arsenault. And he's living today.
You told me.
He retired Brigadier General. And he's living in a nursing home in Arlington, Virginia. That's where he's living now. And he married a lady Marine. She was a major. And they got married while we were at Camp Pendleton. But it's odd, it's a funny thing. He was 23 years old when he became our company commander. And we all called him the old man. Isn't that something? I tell you about how old we were.
Yeah.
But he was the old man.
Well,
But Lieutenant Moore was from New York, but you'd never know it. He was one of the finest, outstanding men I've ever known in my life. He really was. And he joined our platoon, but like I say, he was our platoon, what's called platoon leader, lieutenant. He was the first lieutenant. And he was quite a nice, he was really a nice fellow. In fact, I'd said this before, and I still say it. If I'd ever had a son, he'd have been named Anthony Thomas Moore. Anthony Thomas Dixon.
He was killed when?
He was killed on Saipan.
And you all having a reunion.
We
And he didn't know that his son was born? Or?
I did not. Well, we knew when his son was born.
Yeah.
His son was born 2 months before we landed on Saipan.
So he never saw his son?
He never seen his son. And his son never laid eyes on him except pictures. And Lieutenant Moore, like I say, the first night on Saipan, we were shelled quite a bit. They had artillery zeroed in on us, and it was devastating, I'm telling you. And nobody could understand exactly how they were so accurate with their artillery until the next day. We landed on Saipan just south of a little town called Garapan. We had a big sugar mill there in that town. They had a huge smokestack. I don't know who it was, but somebody spied an antenna sticking out the top of that smokestack. They found out there was an observer up there, and he was with a radio, and he was zeroing that artillery dead directly on us, looking down at us. Well, they radioed a ship, a destroyer, and they shelled the heck out and cut it down in steps. That smokestack.
You on artillery, sir.
But
Lieutenant.
he was up there as an observer, and he was led into us. And now, the reason I'm telling this is that during that night, now this is something else. You hear a lot about foxholes. I never dug a foxhole in my life. I never seen a foxhole dug.
You had shell over.
We had slit trenches.
Oh.
Now, you didn't dig a foxhole, you dug a slit trench. Now, a slit trench is about a foot and a half deep, and as long as you are tall. That's where you can get in it. Well, that night what we could, it was rocky and everything, we had dug slit trenches. Well, Lieutenant Moore, I'd say, he and our runner took about 30 yards away from me over to my left. And they were shelling us all night long. The shells was coming in. Well, one of the shells had made a direct hit on Lieutenant Moore. The only thing that it didn't blow all to pieces was his head. It took his head off, and the next morning, his body parts and a lot of others were scattered everywhere. But his head was still in his slit trench.
And y'all having a reunion, I believe.
Yeah.
His son came to the reunion.
We were in Norfolk, Virginia at our annual 4th Marine Division reunion. And this young man come walking up. And I looked at him, and I said, my God, there's Lieutenant Moore. But I said, it can't be, he's dead. Well, the guy walked up, and he says, I'm Anthony T. Moore. I said, son, you may think you are, but Anthony T. Moore's dead. He said, he was my daddy. And that's where we met. And we've been good friends. Now, he wrote a book.
I've ordered the book.
Yeah. He wrote a book telling about his search, trying to find his daddy. And I think he's a nice young man, but he's too educated to write a book, because a lot of the stuff he puts in, the first part of the book, if you don't watch it when you get it, you'll skip it. But he gets on into the other. It's a good book,
Well, I wanted you to tell the story of Lieutenant Moore because he was such an important man in your life.
That's right. He
Now,
was.
He was with you on Quadrilline.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He was with us on the
I
Moore,
believe-
Lloyd, the Moore.
it was on Quadrilline that you saw your first Jap.
Yeah, that.
And tell us about that.
Well, you got to know what a tank trap is. Tom, you know what a tank trap is? Well, we landed on Kwajalein about 20 or 30 yards up from the water edge of the water. There was a tank trap. They had a tank trap there. We landed, and there was some firing going on, a few artillery shells coming in. But I run on up and jumped down in that tank trap. Well, I landed right on top of the first Jap I ever laid eyes on in my life. He was alive. He wasn't dead. Well, it scared him as bad as it did me. Well, he screamed and hollered, and he took off down that tank trap, and I screamed and hollered and come back out of that tank trap. And the first person I seen laying there was Lieutenant Moore, and I fell outside of him. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "There's a Jap in that hole." He said, "Well, what did you expect to find in there?" I said, "Yeah, well, I didn't think I'd go jump right on top of one." But I had never seen a Jap before. I'd seen pictures.
The Quadrilline wasn't too bad.
No, it wasn't.
But on Namur, was it on Namur that Lieutenant Colonel Dice was killed?
Right.
And he was from Georgia.
Yeah, he was from Augusta, Georgia. He was a lieutenant colonel. He was a battalion commander. And he was one of the few people in the country that ever received the, I can't think of the name of the thing now, but anyway.
The Medal of Honor.
He got the Medal of Honor. And he, before then, while in civilian, he got the Carnegie Award.
Well, yeah.
For saving some lives.
And
He's one of the very few that ever had both of them. And
I
they
believe,
called him Big Red.
and it was on, and you went from Quadrilline to Namur.
Well, yeah, we left there. There had been such a disaster at Tawala that they decided to change their tactics. At Tarawa, they invaded Tarawa, and they didn't worry about the islands laying out close in the around the island. But and that was a big fatal mistake. Now, a lot of them Marines don't like to talk about mistakes they made too much, but they did that. But they learned from it. So when they invaded the Marshall Islands, Kwajalein, Roy, Namur, a lot of other little islands, they took the regiments and broke them up. And we started out the islands outside and worked into the big islands, Roy and Namur. And when we got there, all them others were done with the troops that was on that, and their support and all that they could have got from there, they couldn't get no more. So that was, all made it that much better, really.
The Enowetok was in there.
Yeah, Enowetok was there.
Enowetok.
Yeah.
And all this was on the 4th Division.
Right.
I mean,
we left the States, and the ships we were on went straight, and right off the coast of Lahaina, Maui. We pulled in there and docked for one day. They didn't dock, I'll take that back. They dropped anchor, but nobody went ashore. They did, it wasn't a little peon, it might have been, General Gates might have went ashore, I don't know. But anyway, none of us got to go ashore, but we stayed there one day. Ships pulled out and joined the Armada. Well, I never seen so many ships in my life around Pearl Harbor. And we went there, still didn't know where we were going. We had went aboard ship in San Diego and had not been off the ship. And we landed down at Enowetok.
you used the old LSTs when you had to climb down. I don't know.
Well, the first boats we had, the first landing craft, was the old craft that had the front drop down. Well, you were asking to somebody sitting up there in the bushes, he didn't have to do nothing but just aim right there where they knew you had to come out that hole. So they come in with what they call the alligator, which was much better, really. You should have got submarine pay for it, though, because you stayed underwater going in more than you did on top of the water.
Yeah, but it went straight on up on the beach.
Well, that was supposed to.
Oh.
It was supposed to. But most of the time, the driver, all those islands had a coral reef around them. Well, most of those drivers, when they get that coral reef, they climb up on it. Well, the water was a little shallow once you get that coral reef. But they get up there and they holler, "This is it, as far as I can go." Well, you'd have to jump over the side. Those alligators didn't have no way to get out except jump over the side of it. A lot of times you jump in water up to your nose.
Did you ever have anybody to go on the end of the beach? I mean,
Never did. They for some reason they would keep from going in there. But we did have one.
Yeah.
But he went under strict protest because he had a .45 pointed at the back of his head.
That's what I want you to tell about.
I hate to want to say but when he said, "This is it," there was a .45 put to the back of his head, says, "You take this damn thing to the sand, or either you die right here."
And he took it to the
He
sand.
went to the sand. That's all it was.
Yeah. But what?
And let me tell you, one of my very closest friends, a boy named Holgate, had the shortest time spent in combat any man I know of. Bless his heart. He was, when we started to get out of the alligator out on the coral reef, the first on Quadrille, down the Weetaka, you throw your leg up over the side. But when he threw his leg over the side, the Jap shot him in the leg, and he fell back in, and they had to take his leg off above the knee.
You got a picture of him at one of your reunions?
I got a picture of him at a reunion with his pant leg folded up and on his crutches. But we kid him about it. He did it on purpose.
Now, you went from Kwajalein, and you went to Central Pacific. Now, those were islands, too, that the Japanese had for a number of years.
Right.
People don't realize that.
Right.
After World War I.
Right. And after World War I, when they were dividing up the world, they gave the Central Pacific to the Japanese. And they had fortified those islands for years and years. And, in fact, one of those pictures I showed you a while ago, there's a picture of a pillbox in that one there. The walls on that thing over 4 foot thick. Concrete with steel reinforced.
And you went, well, was that when you saw the Wilkinson fellow?
No, I saw him on Saipan.
Okay, all right. We'll get to that.
Well, let me tell you, on that pillbox, we were on the moor, we were advancing on it. And they kept the apertures in the thing. They'd stick the machine guns out and shoot at us. And we couldn't get close to it. We called it a half track come in. Well, we asked them to go up and shell it. Now they went up to that thing and they took the barrel. They had a 75 millimeter cannon on that in that half track. And they took the barrel of that thing and stuck it right up to that hole in that pillbox and fired in it. And every time they fired, the back end of that half track would jump up. But we didn't know, well, that's got them. They fired 4 or 5 rounds in there, backed off, and it got out of the way and we started advancing. And then machine gun right back up in that hole and started shooting. We couldn't figure that out until after we got the pillbox. They had a maze of walls, all shapes and everything in that thing. The walls inside was 3 foot thick. The outside walls was 4 foot thick. And they were concrete, steel reinforced. And nothing would penetrate. The bombs hadn't even done it. And when they saw that half track come up, evidently they run around behind a bunch of those walls, and you couldn't get to them. They backed off. They just went right back up.
How did you finally get it?
flamethrower.
Oh, all right, okay.
You could take a
Yeah.
flamethrower and, you could make one of them turn
Yeah.
the corner from your house.
Now, somewhere, either on Kwajalein or Saipan, you were talking to me about you really never, the words that you remember in Japanese was when they'd come up to you and try to surrender.
Right.
Well,
We had a little book, a little pamphlet-like book, of some certain phrases in Japanese that we had supposed to learn. But the one that I learned the most, the only one that I remember today, was Hifuku Onuge. And the reason I learned it is they would kill you. They would come up and surrender. And if you just said, okay, come on, and you were dead.
what did that phrase mean?
That take your clothes off.
And they mean, you mean all of it?
That's all of it. And you didn't say that to them but 3 times. The 3rd time they didn't take their clothes off. I hate to say it, but they were shot.
Because they would hide, they would
They
conceal a
would hide
grenade.
knives, they would hide hand grenades. They would strip down sometimes nailed to a cheese string. And they'd have a hand grenade hid down under that cheese string.
You came, after you left Kwajalein, you came back to Maui.
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 Yeah, that was our advanced base, was on Maui. And we came back there and got replacements. The fellows that we had lost and all. We got some replacements and retrained and trained them.
Now, was that when you were still with the mortar?
Oh yeah.
And that's when you showed Lieutenant Moore that
Well,
you could shoot a mortar straight up.
On the moor, we had a situation that first let me tell you, Namur is a French word, and the way that island got its name, up until World War I, it belonged to the French. But some way or another, after World War I, the Japanese got it, and they never changed the name. But anyway, the mortar, 60 millimeter mortar, 200 yards was the closest, or your range shot that you could fire to where you were firing the gun. And we had a situation where we need to fire 50 yards, 25 yards. We were that close to them, and we need to fire the weapons there. But there was nothing in the book telling you on a 60 millimeter mortar how to do that, or what elevation and all that. So on Easter Sunday, 1944, Lieutenant Moore come by the tent and he says, Sergeant, I want you to go with me today. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going to get your squad, and so we're going out to the range. He said, we're going to work on something. I said, okay. So we went out on the range. And he said, I want to see how close we can fire the mortar to where we're at, where we fire the shell from. I said, I'd make it come back right where I'm sitting. He says, you can't do it. I said, well, yes, I can. I said, you watch it. I said, I turned around, I told him and the rest of the fellows, I said, now be ready to run. So when I say run, you better run. And don't stop. I took the mortar, the tube off of the tripod. I sat down, I put it between my legs. I held it straight up, and I took a shell and I put it down in, and that thing shot up. And I said, the only one I could see that thing looked like it turned and started back. I jumped up and hollered, run. And that thing hit about 25 yards from where I was sitting. I told him, I said, you know now what I'm talking about? He said, yeah, I do. But we worked it out on it and redone the chart. And I had that chart until I met Lieutenant Moore's son. And as we...
Did you tell him the story?
I told him the story about that and a lot of other little things about Lieutenant Moore and the little incidents he and I had. And he said, I'd like to have that chart. Said, you say my daddy wrote the figures on that for the new elevation and all? I said, yeah. I said, I'll send it to you when I get home. And I did. I got home, I took it, put it in an envelope and sent it to him.
The next big one, probably the last one, was Saipan.
Right.
It was probably, now you had in our company, you have 218 men.
Right.
Started with.
Right, that was
That
all
was,
four platoons and everything.
That was a captain and 4 lieutenants, and the captain was the only one to survive.
All
and he's
our-
still living.
All our officers was killed except Captain Arsenal, and he is still dead. In fact, we hope that we'll be able to go out to Arlington next week and get him and bring him to the reunion.
In the 4th Division, you told me it suffered 70% casualties
75.
70 through the war.
The 4th Marine Division suffered one of the highest casualty rates. In fact, here's a history of the United States Marine Corps in battle. Now this, just give you an example, this was on Iwo Jima. By then, Captain Arsenal had been promoted on up, and the company commander was Captain Ketchum.
Now, you wasn't on
I was not on
you were
Iwo
wounded.
Jima.
We need to get to that
Right.
in just a minute.
All right.
See,
But there was 9 men in Item Company left after Iwo Jima.
it was 9 men in your company after Iwo
After
Jima.
Iwo Jima that was able to walk. But
When you went in Saipan, you went in with what you call the Amtrak. Well, we call them
alligators. We
And-
call them alligators.
In the 2nd and 4th Division and the 27th Army
Army
Division.
Division.
And just for a little break here, I mean, you told me a
Well-
story, because I read about it the other night. The 27th Division
Yeah.
didn't come up to par,
Well,
according to General Smith.
first let me say this. There was nothing at all, what little bit I had to do, working with them, and they were right next to us. But there's nothing wrong with the men. But their commanding general was I don't know what you call him. He was too chicken-hearted or something. I don't know what it was, too soft-hearted.
The 2 Marine divisions were on
Right.
one side. and
Once-
the Army Division was in the
Once
middle.
we
This
landed
is
on the
on
second
Saipan.
and the 4th Marine Division landed. The 27th was in reserve. We went, the 2nd went in halfway, and we went across the southern tip of the island. And then when we got ready to swing and go up the length of the island, they called the 27th in, and they come in and put them in the middle. And the 4th was on the right, the 2nd was on the left. When we started our advance up the island, if you made 100 yards a day, you did real good. Some days you couldn't make 100, you couldn't advance 100 yards. But they didn't advance at all. I hate to say it, but they just didn't move. Well, about the 3rd day, our flanks was open.
Did you know that at the time?
Yeah, we knew they were not advancing. And they wasn't advancing because the commanding general, General Smith, would not order them to advance. He never issued an order. Well, the Marine, one of the very few times a Marine general at that time was ever in command of an overall operation. Well, it was at that time. And General Holland M. Smith was overall commander of the whole operation. Well, General Gates seen what was happening. He was our divisional commander. The guy that was the commander of the general of the 2nd Division seen what was happening. So they called General Smith, Holland Smith, and told him something's got to be done. So he goes aboard to the island, goes on the island, goes to the Army General and says, what's wrong? He said, I'm not going to order them to advance and be killed. He said, they'll be killed. He said, well, what do you think's happening to my 2 divisions? He said, they're getting killed, some of them too. He said, I'm not going to order them. No, I'm not going to do it. he relieved him of his command. The only time in the history that the Marine general relieved the Army general of his command. And he took the adjutant, the second in command of the division, a brigadier general, promoted him to major general, and put him in command of the division. And from that day, all the way on up the island, no trouble at all.
But that's still written up, and there was a lot of
Oh yeah.
Howland Man Smith got in trouble.
Oh yeah, it almost caused the Marine Corps to cease to exist. Oh, there was a lot of congressmen and a lot of senators, and there was enough Army generals. Went to Admiral Nimitz in Honolulu. They say, according to the book, that they flooded his office. They wanting Howland Smith court-martialed and everything else.
Now the Japs counterattacked it with tanks. I mean.
Right. We were advancing up the island, and it was a valley, a big valley like. And we started down. We went down in the valley, and it took us 2 days to get over the hill and down in the valley. And we started to set up our perimeter late one afternoon down in the valley there. And they counterattacked with tanks. Well, at that time, our tanks hadn't got there. We didn't have no tanks for support at that time. But I think back over in the other sector, they might have had some, but we didn't have none with us. But we had to withdraw and went back up out of the valley. There was quite a bit of fighting going on down there. And Captain Arsenal came by, and he told me, he said, we left a lot of wounded men down there. He said, we need to get them out. Well, I looked around, and my platoon runner was standing there. I had taken the platoon after Lieutenant Moore was shot, was killed, blown up. But I took him, the platoon.
You were acting platoon leader at that time.
Right.
Now the runner, he was from New York.
He was from Brooklyn, New York. His name was Faust Luigi Garcia. He was a heck of a little fellow, real short Italian. I looked around and the only one I seen was him, and I said, all right, Faust, let's go. So he and I took off back down in the valley. There was a little shack down there, and we messed around, and they were shooting at us naturally. And we got behind that one side of the shack and seen a little bit of safety back there. Looking around, see if we could find some spots and wounded that we thought was still living. Faust went out to check on the fellow, see if he was still alive. And they shot him, Cap shot him in the shoulder. Well, that shoulder, he had a Marine emblem tattoo. There was a little blooming idiot stood there, and he shook his fist. He said, you yellow-bellied, slant-eyed so-and-so. He said, you couldn't shoot me in this arm. You had to hit my tattoo. And he was just shaking his fist at him. And the next time they hit him was in the neck. And it blew half his neck away. He hit the ground, and I'd seen it when it done it. I run out and grabbed him and drug him back behind that little building. Wasn't a thing you could do. He bled to death. Because there's no way you can put a tourniquet on somebody with half their neck gone. Well, I sat there a while. That upset me quite a bit that Faust got killed. Because he and I had been together ever since we formed the company. And I looked around, I seen a guy laying out in behind a coconut tree with a sort of move a little bit or something. So I said, God, he's alive. Well, I took off out there and I got him, and I got him back behind the little building. And his leg was just hanging from here down, just that leader behind that was holding it on. He was bleeding right there, and I put a tourniquet up here on his leg. And I told him he had never lost conscience. Sergeant Staskowski. He was in the first platoon of our company. I told him, Staskowski, we got to get out of here. I said, these damn jokers is trying to kill us. I said, they gonna kill us if we don't get out of here. So I picked him up, got him on my shoulder, and took off. I I couldn't have gone very far, and the world come to an end. And I literally mean I thought it had come to an end. Everything just, 3 days later, I woke up, and I looked up, and there was a nurse standing there looking down at me. I looked at her and I said, "Where am I at?" She said, "You're on board the USS Solus, Navy hospital ship." I said, "How long I been here?" She said, 3 days. I said, 3 days? For 3 days? Since you've been out? I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "I don't know." I found out later that they had an underground ammunition dump. There's a reason they counterattacked the tank to take the valley back from us. They say they would figure I guess they couldn't hold it. So they set it off, they blew it up. I was on top of the dump, evidently, when they blew it up. They've never found any trace of Sergeant Siskowski. They don't know what happened to him. He's listed as dead, but they don't know. They don't know what happened. They've never found him. And we don't know to this day how I survived it. I don't know who got me out of the valley. I've asked at the reunion, I've asked all of the corpsmen, which is one of the best group of people in the world was our Navy corpsmen. And I've asked all of them, and they know. And then one night, 50-something years later, I was sitting here and the phone rang, and it was a fellow from our company named Joe Coney, lived in New Jersey. I answered the phone, called Joe had called me. He says, "Is this B.B. Dixon?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You in the Marine Corps?" I said, "Yeah." "Was you on Saipan?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You dead?" I said, "Joe," I am not dead." He said, "Yes, you are. You are dead. I know because I've seen you." I said, "Joe, I am not dead." He said, "Dixon, I know. I passed by it, and when we went back in down in the valley, I seen you and walked over, and you were dead." I said, "Joe, I am not dead." I couldn't convince the rascal that I was alive.
Yeah. But your leg was broken, your face was
Right,
all
my
covered.
right leg, he said, I don't know. He said my right leg foot was under my head. That my leg was folded up by under my back. And my face was covered with blood. And my right cheek was broke, but the bone in here was broken in 2 places there. And I don't, like I say, I don't really know. I know when I did wake up aboard the hospital ship, my leg was in a cast. And in later years, oh God, 50 years later, I guess, 45, I had a lot of trouble with this knee. And I've had 3 operations on that knee. And the last one was to just do away with it and put a steel knee in there. I had a knee replacement the last time. But the first time, I was up at Columbus at the Houston Orthopedic Clinic, and they made x-rays of both knees. Well, the doctor looked at the x-ray of my left knee, and he says, "Where'd you get that piece of steel in?" I said, "There's nothing wrong with my left knee." He said, "There's a piece of steel. Let me show you." And he put the x-ray up on the light, and there's a piece of steel right in here under the lid. Goes down the front of your leg, about a 1/4 inch square and a 1/2 inch long.
You never knew it
I
was still
never
there?
knew it's still there.
There.
And it's going to stay there. And I got a piece in my neck. I got a little piece down in my neck there, and the doctors told me, as long as it didn't bother me, leave it alone.
And you went on the hospital ship down to New Caledonia.
I went on that to New Caledonia, Hospital Mob 108. And while I was in there, I had gotten to where I could move around a little bit. And I was sitting there one morning, I was looking out a window, and a fellow was walking around out there, and I seen this fellow come walking up. He had a big bandage on his back, and all humped over and everything. I said, God, Dad, he looked familiar. He got a little closer. I recognized it was Julian Smith.
The guy you joined the Marines with.
Yeah.
And he was wounded on Guam.
He was wounded on Guam.
Yeah.
And they had sent him down there aboard a hospital ship. And we had quite a reunion.
And then they sent you back incidentally to Guadalcanal.
Well,
Pango.
we first went back to Guadalcanal. Like I say, I got my leg healed up real good and everything. I got to work to get around. Well, like I told you before, once they declare an island secured, that didn't mean nothing. That just meant the big boys could go back to their big homes in Wayway and Honolulu and live good. But that didn't mean the fighting was completely over. Well, it'd been a long time since they had declared Guadalcanal secured. In fact, there was one little pocket of Japs up in the hills. It kept aggravating the heck out of them down to Henderson Field. And they decided that they'd do something about it. So what they could get together, they had a few Marines there still on Guadalcanal, but they didn't have a mortarman.
Mortarman.
Yeah. So somebody looked in the record book and found out I was you mortared, so I was assigned to that. I went up to board of LST and went up to Guadalcanal. And we went up the hills and we messed around there for about 2 weeks and we finished off that little pocket of Japs up there. And then I went back down to
Pango.
No, went back to the mail. I went back to the hospital of all places. And that's when I met this Dr. Hodemaker. He was a nut. He was an absolutely first class nut. He'd be sitting there talking to you. He'd tell you about a baseball game. It was in the last of the ninth inning. The score was tied. The bases was loaded. There was 2 outs, 3 balls, and 2 strikes. He built it up the way you just couldn't. And then when he get it all built up, he had an old metal desk. He kicked aside that desk. Most of the time you jump up and run because you're gun shy. But he'd do that to just see how you things. And like I said, he was a nut. Well, they went in there, had made me go in and talk to Dr. Hodemaker. Well, he pulled that old crap on me, and I didn't learn. The other fellas had told me about the ball game and all that and everything. And I was sitting there on pins and needles waiting for him to get to that kick. I said, I'm gonna fool in this one, ain't gonna jump and run. And I didn't. But after that, they loaded us up and told us they were gonna ship us home.
San Diego. Now, was the war was still going on?
Yeah.
And you probably would have gone to you came back to San Diego.
Well,
No.
I left there. We left Yamel and went to Pango. We stayed there a couple of weeks, and then we boarded back aboard another ship come along and picked us up, and brought us all the way to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And they put us in the hospital at San Leandro Naval Hospital out at the Navy base across the bay from San Francisco at Oakland. Yeah. And we stayed there till they got through checking us out and all and everything. And then they reassigned me down to the Receiving and Redistribution Center at San Diego. And while I was there, I got a letter from my mother telling me that this boy, friend of mine that I was raised up with, Carol Harmon.
Carol Harmon lived right down the street from me now. He was in boot camp there. Well, I decided one Sunday I'd go see Carol. So I went down to the office, and the recruit office, and I told them who I wanted to see. They said, well, we'll send a runner and get him. So they sent a runner to his platoon and brought him back up to the place.
And when he walked in, that was the saddest looking thing I ever laid my eyes on in my life. If he hadn't had 2 ears, you couldn't see him from here down. So that cap, the ears was holding his cap. It was way too big. Sleeves down below his fingers. His pants was rolled. Now he had just got to boot camp and got his first issue of clothes, and naturally they gonna give you everything wrong. But he looked sad.
But then after you went to the hospital, that's when they discharged you?
No. I left, well, after I got to San Diego to receive my redistribution son, the duty I had there was the best duty in the world. I refereed Lady Marine ball game, football, touch football. Now that was good duty. but now there were some tough old girls in there. You better bet it. You call one out, a foul on one, they wouldn't only just cuss you, they'd hit you. And they didn't, 3 stripes didn't mean nothing to them. But I left there, I was reassigned to the Naval Mine Depot at Yorktown, Virginia, with a 30-day delayed en route. Well, see, I still hadn't been home. At one time, 4 days since the day I joined. So I come home. Well, May and I got married. So we've been going together even when we were
1945.
45.
Yeah.
We got married. And I reported after so long a time, I went back and I had plenty of time. I never was late. I never was reprimanded anything about not being on time. So I reported in at Yorktown 2 days early. And I was stationed there, and it was cool. It was cold. And
Mary didn't go with you though.
No, she came up later. She spent Christmas with me, that Christmas up there.
That was Christmas of 45, and you got out in 46.
46, February of 46.
Came on. And
let me tell you something.
Yeah.
They had me, they gave me my discharge. And I went to Richmond. They furnished a truck for it. There was a truckload of us. They carried us over to Richmond, Virginia, from Yorktown. I went in the depot, and I told the guy I wanted a ticket to Bainbridge. He said, "How you get to Bainbridge?" I said, "You go to Savannah and change trains, and then catch a train from Savannah to Bainbridge." He said, "Well, there's no use even looking," because he said, "Your train's full. We can't set seat no more. So you just can't get on. Ain't no way." I said, "There's got to be somewhere on that train that I can sit or stand. And if you sell me a ticket, you let me worry about getting on." He said, "Well, if you won't do it, all right." So he sold me a ticket. Well, the last car on the train had a bar in it. And usually all that sitting back there, I'm not going to talk about you now, Tom, but all that back there was for officers that were traveling on the train. And it was loaded with servicemen, the train was. But then all the officers sitting back there in the bar. I couldn't find nowhere to sit but on one of them stools at the bar back there on that last car. And I figured I was as good as they was, and better than some of them. So I just went right on that car, and the conductor said, "You can't go in there." I said, "Well, yeah." Because they taught us in the Marine Corps, don't go where you're welcome, because they waiting on you. If you see a sign that says, "No Marines allowed," so that's where you want to go. Because they may throw you out, but so you can say, "I was there."
No. So they let you in.
I stayed there.
That's
I rode all the way from
Yeah.
Richmond, Virginia to Savannah, Georgia, sitting on a stool, bar stool in that train.
And you came on home and that.
I come on home.
That's
And
Buck, on behalf of our community and our nation, I want to thank you for what you've done and for what you've done this afternoon.
well,
And you've given us something that this is the history of our country, and you were part of it. And,
well, I appreciate you doing it, Mel, because it worries me today because the kids in school are not learning anything. They're not teaching about the history.
They don't even know what Saipan was.
That's right.
And
And
that,
to show you how it really is, I read yesterday where there was a girl, a sophomore at the University of Georgia, asked the professor what animal they got cotton from.
well, another one, Buck, would be they had a test not long ago and people didn't even know where a botanic corridor was.
Well, that's true.
But anyway, we thank you, and we thank you, Tom, for running the camera
Yeah.
for us. It's been a wonderful afternoon.